Chapter 17. The Good, the Bad, and the Broke. Russ was hired on a construction crew in Sun City Center outside Ruskin, Florida, where his family lived. Every evening, he would drive into town to call me from a coin-operated phone booth. There was no free long distance, and payphones required cash deposits. At different intervals, during our conversation, an operator would cut in and ask for more change. I waited patiently as I heard the coins drop in. We had so much to talk about. Before we knew it, Russ had filled the coin box and had to move to another booth. After several weeks of long-distance calls and endless coins, he decided it would be cheaper to send me a plane ticket so we could talk in person. I was overjoyed, but I wasn't going without a commitment. "Not unless you marry me," I replied, so it was rumored I proposed to him. The decision to marry wasn't traditional, romantic, or even anticipated. Still, we both knew it was part of God's plan. Peering out of the aircraft window, I presume Florida was thousands of lush green islands surrounded by rivers and blue lakes. It was beautiful, and I was excited to be in the center of it. Departing the plane, I gasped for air. The humidity was suffocating. Once I caught my breath, I looked anxiously for Russ, but he was nowhere to be found. I loitered in the aisle, went to the restroom, and waited in the boarding area, but still no Russ. He was always on time, so I was concerned. I hadn't realized there was a tram between the passengers and the families who were waiting. Russ knew the plane had landed and all travelers had disembarked, but I was not with them. By the time I exited the tram, we were more than anxious to see each other. I ran into his arms. I could hardly wait to begin my new life. Riding in his red Volkswagen Bug, I took in the sights. This was going to be my new home, thousands of miles from everything and everyone I knew. I thought about my parting words with my oldest brother Jim and his wife. I had refused to accept their advice when they told me the man should come to the woman, not the other way around. The discussion was unpleasant. I told him I was 22 and old enough to make my own decisions, a remark I would later regret. We drove over bridges and waterways and past dark green grass and tall buildings, all lined with palm trees, so beautiful compared with the dry desert in California. We turned onto a long gravel driveway, lined on either side with modular homes and tall oaks. I was a little nervous about meeting his family. We walked up to a double-wide trailer, and I hesitated before Russ opened the door. This was it. There was no turning back now. I was overwhelmed by beautiful smiles, open arms, and genuine love. It didn't appear they had any reservations about me, and I was immediately given a nickname, Jody. Over the course of the next week or two, I met the rest of the family as they all lived on the same property. Grandma and Pop lived across the driveway. Uncle Gary and Aunt Julie lived catty-corner. Uncle Bill and Aunt Teresa lived next door, and the place was overrun with cousins. I had never seen such a congenial group. Everyone offered to help with the wedding in any way they could. Aunt Julie said she would make the bridesmaids' dresses. A friend made the cake. Cousin Carol offered her new Volkswagen Bug for us to drive on our honeymoon. Pat arranged for Maranatha Baptist, the church Russ and Debbie attended before going off to Bible school, to host the wedding. I was uncomfortable with that, and perhaps the small congregation was as well, but they offered me warm smiles. My maid of honor had to be someone special, like my cousin Chris or Teresa, but funds were short on both ends. I settled for a friend from Bible school who lived a few towns over. She was a constant companion for months before the wedding. even moving in with Russ's cousin Carol and her husband. She became familiar with the entire family. I was thrilled to have someone I knew in my wedding. I chose Russ's younger sisters, Jeannie and Karen, to be my bridesmaids. They wore dark red dresses trimmed in white, and my white dress was trimmed in red, Russ's favorite color. The entire affair was inexpensive and low-key. Russ had joked about getting married while we were dating in Bible school, but I told him absolutely not. He was 4.5 years younger than me. Although he was tall, masculine, and good-looking, I had no intention of marrying an 18-year-old. Using his Aunt Julie as an example, he claimed they had a great marriage, and she was 7 years older than her husband. I stubbornly resisted. The idea of marrying someone that young was preposterous, even though his maturity level far exceeded mine. Once Russ drove away from St. Louis, I regretted my refusal immediately and worried I'd never see him again. I couldn't have been more mistaken. Still, I was determined not to marry an 18-year-old, so after arriving in Florida, I set the wedding date for a week after his 19th birthday, which was on his sister's 20th birthday. They are Irish twins, born within 12 months of each other. Within a few weeks of the wedding, things began to unravel. Russ was laid off from his job, so we knew there would not be an extensive honeymoon. Uncle Bill and Aunt Teresa hadn't received a formal wedding invitation, so they refused to attend. My oldest brother informed me that there would be no one there from California, as it was too far away and too expensive. Then a week before the wedding, my good friend from Bible school, who was to be my maid of honor, ran off with the husband of Russ's cousin, Carol. There was chaos everywhere. I began to question God. Had I made a mistake? Was God not in this? Russ assured me we were in God's will. We just needed to trust Him. It seemed the moment we turned it over to the Lord, prayers were answered. My brother Stan was determined not to miss his little sister's wedding. He, Peggy, and my folks flew out a few days in advance, so my father walked me down the aisle. I wasn't aware of Uncle Bill and Aunt Teresa's absence, as I hadn't met them. I was stunned when our parents and family surprised us with a cruise to the Bahamas. The most astonishing occurrence was Carol, Russ's cousin, who stepped in as my maid of honor. She replaced my friend who had just run off with her husband. It turned out to be a wonderful day. We were eager to leave, but before we could, my father caught me by the hand and asked to speak with me privately. We retreated to one of the back rooms, where Dad gave me an emotional farewell. All I remember were the tears in his eyes as he urged me to support your husband no matter what, and always love him. Words I can't say I always followed, but ones I will never forget. Russ had set aside enough money for a couple of nights at a local hotel before we were told about our week in the Bahamas. Our first night was in Lakeland, Florida, where we stayed in room 23. We requested that room number for years afterward as a reminder of that special night. The second night was spent in Miami. This place left a lot to be desired. We should have been suspicious when the clerk asked if we were planning to stay the entire night. It was noisy and a little frightening, but it was within our budget. Pop handed us a check for $50 prior to leaving. It was all the money we would have on our honeymoon. The ship departed Monday morning, so with Pop's check in hand, we hurried to the nearest bank. Ignoring my shocked expression, the bank teller refused to cash a check from out of town. The next two banks were also reluctant and declined to take the risk. We were miles away from home. Time was running out, and the note we held with Pop's signature was worthless. I was in tears as we prayed about our situation before entering the last bank. We met with the manager, who was also hesitant, but I burst into tears and sobbed, "This is our honeymoon. It's all the money we have." The Lord softened his heart, and he told the teller to accept it. We thanked him and the Lord as we hurried to the ship. Russ tucked $10 under the floor mat of our borrowed Volkswagen to ensure we had enough money to make the trip back home. He has always predicted problems, solved issues, and thought ahead. We had an unbelievable time. Our cabin was in a berth below deck with twin bunk beds. We had no discretionary funds to spend, and I was seasick coming and going. It was a priceless honeymoon for two kids who were head over heels in love. We enjoyed the free onboard entertainment and waved off shopkeepers eager to sell their wares as we walked through town. On our final day, we stopped at a street vendor selling a pair of wooden statues. He was asking $5, but all we had was $3 and had already shortchanged the required gratuities for the staff, the import baggage handlers, the cabin stewards, and maitre d'. We stood in line waiting to go through customs. The passengers ahead of us declared hundreds of dollars worth of merchandise, including crystals, silverware, alcohol, and jewelry. We blushed as they opened our suitcase. We had a banana, a roll of toilet paper from our cabin, and 2 wooden statues for a declaration of $3.